Greg Gutierrez. I know you fished Oroville quite a bit, and what are some of your past experiences and finishes on the lake?
My experience with Oroville goes way back. My first tournament, I started in the non-shared weight format, was on Lake Oroville. I won that tournament, and I parlayed the earnings from that tournament into my very first Pro-Am, which was in, I believe, 1996. I fished as a pro, and I actually took second place in that tournament, lost to Gary Dobbins by less than a quarter of a pound. It was close. And I got a lot of other experience on there. I fished several Bassmaster invitationals there, cut checks and in all of those there. I've won several team tournaments with my team partners on Oroville, and as well as a BFL. I won a BFL on Oroville. Oroville's always been a pretty friendly lake to me. It's a lot like Shasta.
So what do you know about the current lake conditions, and maybe what can the fishermen expect for the upcoming TPT Pro-Am tournament there at Lake Oroville?
I'll tell you, I haven't spent a lot of time on the lake in the last year, but I did run there a week and a half ago just to check it out. The water is way down, so there's submerged islands and stuff like that. Fishing was on fire, to be honest with you. I caught a lot of fish. I didn't have a lot of weight. I didn't have a lot of time on the water, to be honest with you. I had a mechanical problem and had to get off the water. As far as what anglers can expect, yeah, the water's low, but that means there's island tops out that are sticking out or submerged. Good thing is there's not a lot of debris floating around in the water. It's a normal thing for this time of year. So lake conditions, water's clear and low.
Do you mind sharing with us how you might approach the lake and what are some basic techniques that you'll be utilizing?
I think I'll probably just go after it like I would normally do this time of year. And recent tools are what they are, but with the advent of the Alabama rig, I'll probably be throwing a Frenzy 7-wire, maybe a 5-wire, but I like the 7-wire. It provides a bigger spool out there, so I'll be throwing a Frenzy bait 7-wire rig. I've got some prototype Frenzy shaky heads that I have and some dart heads that I'm working with, but I'll be throwing a lot of that also. To be honest with you, there should be a jerkbait bite coming on pretty quick. That obviously is right in line with the swim bait bite that's going on. So I got a lot of new swim baits that I'm going to be throwing this year. Worked a deal with Roman Made, so their lifelike trout colors and their actions are incredible. So I'll be throwing a lot of that, as well as Dual Reality, just signed with them. So I'll be throwing a lot of that kind of stuff. Jerkbait, swim bait, Frenzy 7-wire, prototype shaky heads and dart head stuff that I'm not quite ready to let out yet, but I'll be working that pretty hard.
Yeah, I know you're also known for being pretty consistent with, I don't know what some might categorize as your down baits. Will that play a role for you as well? I know you mentioned a shaky head and maybe a jig or a tube, or how does that stuff usually play out for you on Oroville?
It's true. I do really specialize in that, and here's what's going to happen is if we have weather, any kind of weather, then the reaction bite's going to be on. It is. But if we can get weather, and on the tail of the weather, we get a high pressure zone. Lake Oroville shuts off like no door closing like I've seen before. Lake Oroville can get pretty stingy. I like throwing a tube on Oroville. I like throwing a dart head worm and a shaky head worm. I like throwing a Carolina rig. If I had any preferences in colors, anything green, green pumpkin. I just like the dirt colors, green pumpkin, watermelon, anything like that. There's a couple other colors out there, that Reaction Innovations makes that are really good, that really draw colors. They have some unique shad colors and stuff like that. So if you can get around some of the bait fish in there, some of the smelt, you see a lot of that around. You see activity, you can go down with the bait fish colored worms also. But primarily for me, I'll be throwing green pumpkins, the watermelons, those dirt colors, the brown tubes and stuff like that, and either tubes, worms, or jigs. I like a small compact jig this time of year, and quarter ounce, 3/8 of an ounce, fish it slow. That's kind of what I'm going to be keying on. If I go to a down bait, I'll be fishing slow and methodical with those.
Yeah, you did mention earlier the A-rig, and I was going to ask about, you definitely think that's going to play a factor?
Much as I hate to say it, the spots really like that A-rig, just as they just do. They like it, and I use smaller baits. I'll throw the Reaction Innovation skinny dippers, the smaller ones, the little dippers. And you put a wad of those on a 7-wire rig, it's a pretty big school of fish. They just can't help but eat them. They're down there, they're looking for them. They're spotted bass. They're hungry little buggers. They go after anything. But the A-rig is going to come to play, I'm pretty sure.
But what about the coingler? I know that in most cases it really depends on what the pro might be doing. What are some techniques that maybe the coingler should consider to help him put some fish in the boat?
I've always been one of those kind of guys that looked at a guy and said, "Hey, fish to your strengths," and I agree with that statement wholeheartedly, except for if there's a big bite going on and I'm throwing a jerkbait in 5-6 foot of water and just cranking the bottom with it, just ripping up the bottom and getting a reaction bite like that, and I see a guy trying to throw a drop shot out into 50-60 foot of water and he's not getting bit, I would just have to say it's time to change up. Maybe start throwing towards the bank and try and catch those fish up there with that same drop shot. But I would just tell, if co-anglers fishing this, first of all, they need to pay attention to the details, just like any pro would, I'd say. And most of these guys are doing their homework out on the lake. They're catching fish, they're zeroed in, and it should be a good deal. That being said, CTT's setup, the way they have the two practice days, I absolutely love it. I just love the fact that a guy's not going to sit there and camp out for 3 weeks and then he's going to have to show up cold, get 2 days of practice. Everybody's going to get the same amount of opportunity and then let her fly.
They're phrasing it the working man's tournament.
And rightfully so. Even when I was, working full time, I had to plan out all my time off and everything else like that, a month, sometimes a year in advance. And this is a great opportunity, you're not burning a bunch of time. Let's say a guy wants to show up and he can only show up for half a day of practice. He's still not that far out from the rest of the competition. You could put together a lot, at least a salvage a tournament, with a half a day of practice on, especially on Oroville and some of these lakes.
Yeah, especially with it being a 2-day tournament. I know that's not too many days. It's not like the 3-day or 4-day tournaments, but they should have enough time to put something together in that amount of time.
Correct, I think so. And a 3-day tournament, there's a lot of management goes into trying to maintain the amount of fish you have. If you have 1 or 2 spots, maybe you can't wear them out for 3 days. 2 days you can go in there and just jerk on them and get the biggest bags you can, and that's good. But 3 days, sometimes you have to lay off a spot, and sometimes that costs you when there's other people around.
So we've been talking quite a bit about spotted bass, and I think most people know Oroville is known for its numbers in spotted bass, but we also know that it does have all 3 species, spotted, smallmouth, and largemouth. Do you think those other 2 will play a role?
Oh, well, you know what? The smallmouth are, there's not that big of a population of them, but they're around and they're fairly decent. Now the spotted bass they're getting big, and they're getting pretty big because there's been such a good and successful trout population, or salmon population going in there. So the spots are getting pretty big. They're big and aggressive. They're going after bigger bait. There is always a big largemouth weighed in, and I know for a fact there's been, teen-sized largemouth caught out of that lake, and it happened all the time. So, one guy catches one of those with a little limit, heck, he could be weighing in, almost like he's weighing in 3 times. So, yeah, if you're going to try and target those, I don't know if you target them, and, it's been done before. I believe Andy Cuccia did it a long time ago. Targeted just the largemouth, and he ended up winning a tournament there, an invitational, Bassmaster Invitational on Lake Oroville. And that was before the spotted bass got to be the size that they are now.
Yeah, and I've never seen, I haven't personally witnessed, a winning bag of largemouth, by no means at Oroville, but I have personally been up there and seen those bigger fish, quality 5 to 7 pound largemouth that I had not previously ever seen in there. So that's interesting to hear. We'll see how that plays out. All right, Greg. Well, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for sharing with us some information, and I guess we'll see you up there. Where can people find you and follow you online?
I got a couple of different ways to get a hold of me. I got the GregGutierrezFishing.com. You can get a hold of me, go through the HQ Bass Angler headquarters, go through there, and you'll see there's some links in there to my website. I got a Facebook page, so look for Greg Gutierrez. He'll be up there. Email or whatever, you can get a hold of me. Email finsandfire@gmail.com. And
all right, Greg. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. We'll be up there.
getting ready for a new year 2014.
Right on. So you've fished quite a bit up at Lake Oroville. I know I've made a couple of trips up there during the winter, and I know you've done pretty well up there in some tournaments. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, and what are some of your better finishes you've had up there at Lake Oroville?
I have spent some time on Oroville. I knew it was kind of the X Factor lake, and if you're going to fish tournaments in California and you plan on doing that for some time, you better learn Lake Oroville. And everybody can go out and paddle largemouth bass, but the finicky fish are the spotted bass, and they're difficult to deal with at times. So we spent a bunch of time up at Oroville learning it. And a result of that, we've had some pretty good tournament finishes, and we won a couple up there. We placed in the top 5 several times. We fished Angler's Choice Pro Teams. We fished 100% bass. So we've had some good finishes on the lake. It really takes a lot of time on the water up there. Those fish move a lot. Spotted bass roam. One day they're on the bank, and one day they might be out in the middle. But we've had some good finishes up there for sure.
So what do you think the current conditions are going to be like?
Conditions in the tournament coming up for the California Tournament Trail, it'll be a little tougher than usual. You're going to have real clear water, lack of rain. The lake's really low. It's been heavily pressured all year in 2013 and going into the event. So I think you're going to have some finicky fish. That clear water condition, lack of rain, really changes the game up there.
So with that being said, what can you expect? What can guys expect when they get up there?
Pretty typical of Oroville. You really have 2 classifications of fish. You have some fish that live shallow or feed shallow at some point during the day, and usually those are the bigger fish, but you're fishing for less fish. The concentration of fish in that lake are usually deep or suspended. So it really depends on what kind of style of fisherman you are.
What are some basic techniques that guys might want to kind of give a try during practice?
Well, I would stick to typical wintertime tactics. Knowing that Oroville is predominantly a spotted bass factory, has quite a bit of big largemouth in it now. And I mean, we've caught some fish 6 to 8 pounds this last year up there. There's quite a bit of them. And even last year, the year before, doing some video shoots, we got into a couple 6-pounders back to back. And those fish are probably pushed to 7.5 or 8 by now. There's some really big largemouth in the lake. But that said, you just got to stick to wintertime patterns. And wintertime patterns is ripping, maybe Berkeley hollow bellies on a jig head. The Alabama rig will come into play. And then your slower stuff, your jigs, your Senkos, and your tubes. And I mean fishing slow. And
using those, they've been primarily targeting the spotted bass?
Yeah, your main focus is going to be spotted bass. You could get lucky and run into a school of largemouth. And if you find largemouth, they will be schooled up together, that's for sure. But you do need to focus predominantly on spotted bass in January up there. That's probably what's going to win the tournament, is a guy that finds 10 better than average spotted bass over a 2-day period, for sure.
So some of those techniques that you mentioned that guys might want to try, what would be some, basic color combinations that you would try out there?
Typical wintertime fishing pattern is ripping. I want to stick with really clear colors right now. There's just not a lot of color in the water. All the lack of rain is really going to have the lake very clear. I would really stick to really clear colors. The Phantom Chartreuse Shad from Lucky Craft is a good one. The I'm a Ghost Flip 120 is a really good one. I've really had great success up there the last couple of years throwing that I'm a bait. But sticking to those clear colors with the lack of color in the water.
And what about your, say your down baits or the jigs and the Senkos and the darter heads, that kind of stuff, or tubes?
For jigs and tubes, stick to the jigs first. Brown on brown, brown on purple. Keep it that simple. You really don't need to vary outside of that box at all. You could fish anywhere from a 1/4 ounce and 3/8 ounce stuff up shallow down to a 3/4 ounce jig if you'd like to fish really deep. These spotted bass this time of year on this lake are going to be anywhere from 2 foot deep to 70. And people will be catching them in all those depths, but there will be a key depth that the better fish are setting up in. And usually in January, that's somewhere in 25 to 40 feet of water.
What about the co-anglers? What are some good tactics and techniques that they might try? I mean, I know it depends a little bit on, quite a bit actually, on what the guy up front's doing, but what are some basic stuff that the co-anglers should probably focus on?
Well, it's going to depend a lot on what your pro's doing. If your pro is a really aggressive, fast fisherman and he's covering a lot of water, let's say he's throwing the Alabama rig. If he wants you to throw the Alabama rig with him all day and you can do that, that's great. But if that's something you just don't have the right setups for, you just can't fish that style all day. That's where that Berkeley hollow belly and a 5-inch trout pattern on a jig head, 1/2 ounce jig head, you can either use a fish head spin or just a jig head. It's going to be a good bait for a co-angler to throw to keep up with that guy that's fishing aggressive, whether he's ripping or he's throwing the Alabama rig. That swim bait lets you keep up with the guy in the front. Now, on the other side of that, some great co-angler baits right now are going to be a tube in the Old Ugly color or just green pumpkin. And I would say right now with the watercolor like it is, Old Ugly is a staple on Oroville. It always gets quality bites this time of year. You'll catch some little fish. You're going to make sure you get bit, but a lot of fish in that 2.6 to 2.9 range, they really like a tube this time of year. It's just a good bait. It doesn't move a lot, and when they don't want the jig, I'd be looking to go to the tube if I was a co-angler for sure. The other thing would be a Senko or a dart head. These things are going to get bites. They're going to put fish in the boat. If the fish tend to be shallow, the Senko's probably going to be a little better bait. If the fish are a little deeper, you can adjust your dart head size all the way up to a 1/4 ounce if you had to, and get that dart head right on the bottom. Those are some really good baits for co-anglers. Stick to greens right now or shad colors.
So what about the colors on the Senkos? What's your favorite combination up there this time of year in this water?
I would keep it super simple. I'll be dead honest with you. I like the natural shad. It does really good up on that lake. Baby bass does very well, but the last couple of years, I'm going to let one out of the box here. I've done really well on watermelon magic. It's a little bit greener. Everybody's been throwing baby bass up there for a long time, so I'm going to go ahead and give you one. That watermelon magic has flat out put some money in our boat, and if you're a co-angler or a guy up on the front of your boat, you might want to check out a 5-inch watermelon magic and just give them a little different look. It's a little bit greener than the baby bass color.
Right on. Well, we certainly appreciate that. And you mentioned earlier the Alabama rig. What kind of a role do you think that'll play in this tournament?
I promise you there's going to be some big bites on it. I don't think there's going to be as many as, per se, a couple of years ago where the Alabama rig just dominated the entire tournament. They've seen it now. It's been out for a while. And again, with that kind of clear water and conditions we've been having, there's not as many rig bites to go around, but you can bet there's going to be some 4 and 5 pound fish caught on that rig, and that's going to be a good chance to catch that bigger black right now, too. Those largemouth bass, you got a good shot at a solid 5 or 6 pounder if you're throwing that Alabama rig around, for sure.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. I know I'm looking forward to it. Are we going to see you at the tournament this year?
You know, we're not. I'd love to be up there, but I can't overschedule myself. I got 4 days at the ISE show. I have a tournament the weekend of ISE, and to follow that up, I just can't do it 2 weeks in a row. But I do intend on fishing some CTT tournaments in the future. I'm excited about their trail. I surely hope, and I'm planning to get there for Clear Lake because it lands right on my time, which is May, and I'm really excited about that.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Hey, so I know where I can find you. Where can everybody else find you on the internet?
Well, there's 2 spots you can find me poking around, and one of them is rbbass.com, and I do have my own website. It is ronhowfishing.com, and you can get a hold of me on either one of those places anytime. I'll email you back. I'll help you with questions and answers. Anything you need to know or you want, or you just need some help about fishing or bass fishing in general, I'll be glad to respond to you.
All right, I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Take care, Ron.
All right, bye, Lance.